So to get started, we have an amazing group of women here for our discussion. We have Valerie Christy, who is a senior associate at Almanac Insights. Elly Truesdell, who is the chief strategy officer at Canopy Foods. Jessamyn Waldman Rodriguez, who's a founder and CEO of Hot Bread Kitchen. And Kimberly Chou, who is the co-director of Food Book Fair and an advisory board member for Equity at the Table. So we have all of them introduce themselves, and one thing I forgot to say when I introduced myself is that my preferred pronouns are she and her.
Hi everyone, as Danielle mentioned, my name is Valerie. My preferred pronouns are also she and her. Quick little tidbit of myself. So as Danielle mentioned, I work for Almanac Insights now. We're a fund that launched just this year in January. We're investing in early stage food companies ranging from CPG products, restaurants, as well as technology, both in the ag and hospitality sector. Prior to launching Almanac, I launched it with David Barber, the co-owner of Blue Hill and Blue Hill at Stone Barns. So I was working at Blue Hill for a number of years, came on as a farm's apprentice, was working in the restaurant to start, went on to launch Blue Hill Yogurt, which is kind of our first branded CPG product in the space, and stayed on doing special projects before starting to talk about Almanac and what it could look like. So we went on and raised our money at the end of last year and launched in January.
Hi everybody, I'm Elly. I also use the pronouns she and her. I'm currently the Chief Strategy Officer of Canopy Foods, and we are ultimately addressing the nightmare that is co-packing. For anyone who's a food brand in the room, you might be familiar. But we sort of bill ourselves as a food production studio that offer manufacturing services and creative capital to emerging brands and category leaders in the space. And before that, I was with Whole Foods Market for 9 years, so I know a lot of faces in the room from my time there. I had a title there that was local forager, so I was responsible for local supplier partnerships, first in the Northeast region, where I got to know Jessamyn very well, and Valerie, and a lot of you, and then more recently was the global director of local brands and product innovation, so got to just sort of be on the cutting edge of what was interesting and new and exciting in food, which has been really especially impactful in the past five to 10 years. So thanks for having me, Danielle. I really appreciate it.
I never like to be the one in the panel that doesn't have PowerPoints, and I did the PowerPoint, and I think I'm the only person that does that. Enjoy, bask in the glory of my beautiful PowerPoint that my awesome team put together. So I'm Jessamyn Waldman Rodriguez, and I'm the CEO and founder of Hot Bread Kitchen. We are a proud Kickstarter, project. We, I guess probably now, 2013 or 2014, we used Kickstarter to fund some scholarships for bakers in training. And it was a great promotional, it was a great way to grow the brand, frankly, and it was a great way to raise some cash. So I'm a big fan. Their reputation speaks for themselves, but I'm happy to talk about how I think it fueled the mission. So we do 3 things at Hot Bread Kitchen. We train women for jobs in the culinary industry. Early on, I had this realization that in most parts of the world, women make bread, but men were getting good jobs in the baking industry. And so we started a workforce development program that now trains women for all kinds of jobs in the culinary industry. 100% of our graduates get placed into jobs with benefits, and 85% of them are still there after a year, which in this industry is sort of an unheard of success. It's really important for the women that go through the training program, but increasingly, really, employers are starting to acknowledge how important it is for their business to have this pipeline of amazing talent. The vehicle, from a financial perspective, and also a vehicle for much of the training, is a 24-hour commercial bakery that we run in East Harlem. If you've been looking for it and you live in the city, our breads are all over Whole Foods, thanks to Elly's advocacy and some other key relationships at Whole Foods. Is our single biggest customer, but we sell through the New York City Green Market system. We sell all the breads online, so if you don't live in New York City, we ship. And that has been, the kind of primary revenue source for the business since we first started candidate. And also, we are our own biggest hiring partner, and we still do a lot of training in that bakery. And the third program that we operate, and the one that I think is in some ways most relevant to what we're going to speak to tonight, is we have a culinary incubator, also up in East Harlem. And since we've started, we've incubated about 250 businesses. We currently have 80 businesses that operate out of the program. Did I take that thingy? Can you give me the next slide? And it is not just baking. A lot of people think because there's a bread in the name of the business that we only incubate bakers, but we don't. We have a lot of different kinds of innovative businesses. About 80% of our businesses are run by female entrepreneurs, not by requirement, just by virtue of who we're seeing in the pipeline. It is a competitive process to get into the incubator, but we provide both access to the licensed commercial kitchen space and a core of business supports that includes access to capital, access to market, so key introductions, and then also logistics and production support and access to our talent. So to give you a sense, I went to my team and I was like, who are the most innovative women in the incubator recently? And there's I would say, a pretty deep bullpen of innovative female businesses. I think and I'll talk about this later, but I think my realization about innovation and where women can really excel is that a business to me is not innovative until they've been selling a product. And innovation for me, in a way, needs to be led with a lot of perseverance and grit, because that is really what it takes to prove an innovative idea. And I think there's a lot of strength in that. 3 businesses that I wanted to highlight because of, I think, the innovation in the business model, but also the grit of the entrepreneurs. On your left is Keisha, who runs Sanaya, which is like a great vegan alternative to yogurt. She's from the Bahamas, and she makes really exotic, beautiful flavored apple sauces, and is a firm believer that adults don't need enough applesauce, and it sells in the dairy case. So really unique product. She's an incredibly compelling entrepreneur. She started in glass, she shifted to plastic because of the price point and logistics, and is now operating out of a co-packer. And so for me, it's been a really, I've been proud to watch her business grow. A business in the middle that's been with us a little bit longer, that I've definitely introduced across the board to our access to market people, is an entrepreneur named Isabel. She's a graduate of the incubator program, but kind of operates out of the same space, and she does a kids meal delivery. I've had the real, I think, honor to work with her on the business model. When Isabel started, she thought she was going to be doing home delivery of kids' meals, which I got little kids, and that seemed like a dream, but it is a very hard model to get traction on, and I'm sure all of you are preaching to the choir here, but home delivery is a very expensive model, and kids' meals are very cheap. So that was a tough model, so she's really iterated and is now selling into private preschools, and so that to me is a niche in the market. School food wasn't what she was going after, but really this kind of daycare model, so that's been a great business. Her business is called Little Green Gourmets. And then on the end is Egunsi Foods. The entrepreneur is named Yemisi, and she's from Nigeria, and she makes these amazing entrees and sauces, and the product has been picked up by Whole Foods, and she's got beautiful packaging, and just, I think, a really strong business model. What I loved about her is that, again, she came to market with some sauces and entrees that weren't quite fitting into how we were eating foods. The flavors were really accessible and delicious and unique, but she's now, I think, in partnership with Whole Foods, iterated to more soup model, which is fits a familiar, exotic flavors in a familiar spot in our daily eating habits, which I think is a great innovation, and I'm really excited to see where she grows. So I'm happy to talk more about innovation and how we support it. I'll pass the mic. And my preferred pronouns are she and hers.
Thank you. Those all look really delicious. I'll look at them while I talk about myself and the work that I do without slides. Hi, I'm Kimberly Chou. I am one of the co-directors of Food Book Fair. which is a festival of writing about eating, and we do events here in New York and we do them in LA. I started in 2012, and in 2016, when my now business partner Amanda and I took it over, we ran a Kickstarter campaign, and we were coached through it by the wonderful Terry Hope Romero, who I see in the audience and want to give a shout out to. Hi, Terry. So I'm happy to be here. I'm also on the advisory board of Equity at the Table, aka EAT. That's EAT with 2 T's and hashtag EATT. EquityAtTheTable.com or at Equity at the Table on Instagram. It's a for us, by us, for everyone really, database of gender non-conforming folks and women who identify as people of color and or are queer folks who work in and around food. Whether you are a food stylist, a food writer, whether you are a lawyer that works with folks angry about lawyers. Someone's leaning on something, but that's okay. So whatever you do in food, if you are a woman of color, if you are a queer woman or gender non-conforming person who is looking to connect with other folks like you, or if you are looking to hire us and pay you what you owe us, you can look for us at Equity at the Table. And my preferred pronouns are she and her.
Great, so we're gonna start off with some difficult questions. First is, there's this implicit pressure for women to act like men in order to succeed. I'm wondering if you all feel that pressure, and if you do, talk about how. If you don't, talk about how you have engineered your work life to not feel that pressure.
So this just brings to mind for me an article that I read, I think it was a Harvard Business Review study that cited how much more often women are likely to take on thankless tasks and unpromotable tasks than men. And I certainly noticed that in, all walks of life and in sort of all of my jobs, whether like how senior or junior I am. And so I've sort of tried to think about that in a way that just feels fair, not that you're gonna all of a sudden start assigning or designating men only to take on tasks that seem thankless. But I also think there's something really important to not just assigning it to the person that you think is going to do it best, because I mean, I've countless examples even now at my work with Canopy where I've been on calls with partners and someone on the other side who's sort of a client or a customer, but who's a man has suggested like, oh, Elly, are you taking notes? And in my mind, it's like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm just not going to do that. So I was like, oh, I actually, no, I'm not planning on it. So if Mike and your team wants to, that would be great, because Mike, in my consideration, is like the sort of the youngest person on the team. He's their support. And I've sort of just, I think it's like unapologetic. Like, there's a level of, like, when I was first working in Whole Foods, I was doing it all. I was definitely volunteering to take notes. I was going out and getting whatever like forks and silverware and people needed, and I think that's part of like showing ambition and drive and initiative, any number of things at a certain point in your career. But I also think there's equity, there's like a way to look at things equitably to say, like who could or would be responsible for this. But I also think it's very tempting to say, I know Mike's not going to take as good of notes as I am, so I'm just going to do it like that. And I think that happens in like all modes of life. I think it happens in parenting. It happens in any like situation where traditionally, generally, maybe a woman or a person who's going to be like more detailed and has better handwriting, any number of stereotypes. But I think it's really important to try to just think about things fairly and think about, yes, I did take on those tasks when I was new to the workforce and felt like that was important, and now I have an authority and I don't think that's the best use of my time, so someone else is going to do that. And to me, I do really try, I don't know if I always think about it. It clearly, like when that specific example came up, I was like, ooh, that like, no, I'm not going to do that. And it felt pretty gendered, but on the other hand, I just think there are ways to sort of tackle it around, like trying to maybe nip it in the bud in a way that doesn't feel as sexist and maybe more just like, oh no, that wasn't, I certainly wasn't planning on doing that. Let's find someone else to do it. So I think there are, of course, pressures to conform, but I also think for me, it's always been sort of like leaning in and hopefully showing authority where I feel like I really do have it, and then asking questions and sort of being vulnerable or showing a certain level of weakness by asking, I don't know how to do that in settings that I don't, because I think people just respect that and don't want you to fake it. So that's sort of been my interpretation of that.
Adding off of that, one, I probably would also be taking notes, which I'm sure that you were doing, because I would probably be taking better notes, just giving them to myself, if anything. I was thinking back to kind of my first couple jobs out of school, and I was super fortunate in that the first two bosses I had were both women, and in both very different stages of their lives. The first was a mom. She was having her second child when I was working for her. She had worked in policy for a while. I was working at Living Social, which was at the time, new startup. Went through a lot, but I was working for her and kind of saw her transition over to the tech side of things and working for this new startup, and she had come from working in policy in DC, worked for her, and then worked for another woman who was a bit younger, but who really taught me kind of the importance as we were trying to build things, especially internally at the company, and having conversations with different departments across the company. And I think at an early age, she kind of pushed me to have conversations with all the teams that we were working with, whether it be the engineers, whether it be the finance team, whether it be the sales team, and it kind of opened my eyes quickly to the conversations that needed to happen. And I think because of that, I got exposure to areas where I might not have thought that I could really participate in the same way, whether it be in finance and looking at P&Ls, or being aggressive on the sales team and kind of seeing how we were building those. And I think the right mentor is kind of pushing you in the right direction and teaching you at an early age that you can be a part of the conversation across the board. And that actually, if you spend time with those teams, it doesn't need to be as much speaking their language, but you're understanding what they're speaking about, and you can contribute to it in your own way, which I don't know if I would have had coming out of school. And I was grateful for the two of them for showing me that path, for sure.
So I think that gender is a powerful signifier, but I think age and ethnicity are too. And for me, I think I'm acutely aware of all three pieces of that, and the privilege that I have being a white woman, and in a way the challenges that I had when I was not young anymore, but when I started, I was young and trying to do something that was ambitious. And so, I think that there's three pillars to discuss that dynamic on. In terms of gender, I never felt like I had to act like a man, and in the training that we do for women that don't have and I think socioeconomic and education is the other pillar on which we have to be aware of how we need to show up in a space to get our agendas moved forward. And so in the work that we do, helping many low-income and minority entrepreneurs move forward, also equally as ambitious and challenging agendas, what can I do to model effective agenda driving, effective stakeholder engagement, the right way to talk, the right way to act, that gets them, that helps them feel in a way same empowerment that I've had the privilege of feeling as an educated woman starting this project. And age, I think it's a tough one. It's a tough one to help people overcome. But we have this real conflict in the training program, the bakers and training program, not in the entrepreneurship development program, where we're putting a lot of women into kitchens that are run by men and that are dominated by women in an industry that has traditionally operated in a very, male energy kind of way, I guess you would say. And training women to be successful in that, while also putting themselves in a position to move up a career hierarchy, is challenging. We simultaneously teach, yes, chef mentality. It is the first English class that we teach in our English classes. yes chef mentality while simultaneously saying that we're doing critical empowerment work, and like how do people navigate, women that are, really entering into a new environment, how do they navigate that really fine balance? And so that is where I spent a lot of time thinking, what have I learned? What do I know? What did I not have to learn but I've done naturally since I started this? How can I then take that and help either younger women or women that are coming from a different background?
Do you have any examples to share?
Can you guys speak louder?
Oh yeah.
Of ways that you're coaching, examples.
Yeah. I mean, I think modeling it, right? And I think, we are now a large organization. At this point, almost all of our directors and managers are women, and all of them are strong leaders. And you can ask, many of them are in the room, but I hope that the kind of forge forward and success that we've had in the way that I represent Hot Bread Kitchen in the universe, they are then taking back to their staff and pushing that agenda forward. I think that's a key element. I mean, we have the benefit of both modeling it and then teaching it through curriculum and education and helping in the incubator. When we bring Whole Foods in and we do buyer showcase, there's a lot of work that goes into that, and a lot of pre-thinking and ensuring that women and the entrepreneurs, and especially the low-income entrepreneurs, have as domain of their financials, so that they speak with confidence. They understand the typical logistical questions that Elly's going to just kill them with when she walks up to their booth. As much as we can prepare people for that, both by modeling how I do that and the other people in our company do it, and then also by literally sitting down and pre-vetting them with those questions, I think is one way that we try really hard to do that.
Can you ask the question one more time?
So the question is, as a woman in business, so there's typically this implicit kind of pressure to behave like a man, right, in order to succeed. So I'm wondering if you feel that pressure, and if you don't, how are you cultivating a workspace or a work life for yourself that you're able to do that?
Sure. I can talk about my experience as a younger person, or a younger version of myself, where I worked in newspapers. Throughout high school, college, and my first several years working professionally, I was a journalist. I thought that's all I wanted to do. I worked at really big media companies, and I thought I could climb the ladder. And always, as someone who was trying to do the most, trying to do stuff on the sides, I worked nights at this one newspaper, I worked during the day to do other stuff, in order for it to pay off for me in a way that kind of Elly was talking about, that was sort of associated with more junior, sort of generally women tasks, right? But at the same time, I realized I was modeling myself or aspiring to be all like the straight white guys that I thought were my mentors, which that can be a thorny sort of situation if you're looking to those folks for affirmation or to sort of fell into the food world. And I immediately started working with Elizabeth Thacker-Jones, who started Food Book Fair. So she was sort of a model for me as someone who was a young woman who ran her own startup media company, and I was meeting a lot of other people like her, a lot of people in this community, and seeing other methods of working, but also recognizing in other people as well as in myself the sort of toxic masculinity and those models of working that I had to interrogate and unlearn before I could begin doing the work that I do now. And I think a lot of it is just experience over time, seeing it modeled elsewhere, seeing it modeled in other businesses, seeing it modeled in other situations out in the world. One example that I like to talk about is the Allied Media Conference in Detroit, which is something I've been part of over the last couple of years. There are folks that have been organizing and coming to this conference for 20 years now. People using media, whether that's DJing, whether that's making art, or zines, or making food and sharing it as a way to build toward a more creative and just world. Someone has described it to me as sort of like a community organizing version of Burning Man. Like everyone descends on Detroit, but there are a lot of people that are based in Detroit that do that work year-round, and people come and build with them. And there are all sorts of different ways that people show how childcare works in a collective, how people show that like collective leadership can work, or how really making art or sharing food or teaching and learning from each other can show different ways to live and different ways to operate. And we try to take that back into the rest of the world when we sort of go back to where we come from. And being part of that sort of really opened up my eyes, and it really showed me how queer, women-led, gender non-conforming-led ways of living were going to help me in my own life and as I was growing, and as someone who brought people together as my work and who ran a business. And that was something that I saw a little bit more when I started spending time with these folks in Detroit. And I was starting to see that already in the creative food world that we occupy. But when I was previously in a much more narrow, sort of more corporate confine, the models that I knew and the models that I knew in our dominant society were modeled after men.
I'm curious, Elly, I mean, you just left Whole Foods and you are starting this co-packing company, which is definitely a male-dominated industry. How are you rethinking culture and leadership as a company?
Yeah, it's a very male-centric world, manufacturing traditionally. I think, I don't know if we look at it so much as straight-gendered, but we really are looking to promote diverse leadership more than anything. And it's hard to do. We're in a new community. So our facility is actually in Pennsylvania, and most of the founding team has been based in or was based in New York, and so our contacts are up here. Our community is here. So we're relying on a lot of other people in a part of Pennsylvania that luckily has sort of a dearth of manufacturing. But I think we're, more than anything, we are discovering and finding that the women in our facility are so valuable, and a couple of the more senior men that I work with have joked, but they're like, I think that this plant's going to be run by women, like, as soon as we possibly can. If we can get enough of them here, then we want them. And there is just a certain level of detail and care and thought that we are finding. And again, I always sort of have a hard time ascribing or always putting one attribute to a male or a female, because I think that's a little unfair. But at the same time, generally speaking, we are seeing that the women who are in our facility are taking that much more care with the product. And to quickly sort of dig into what we're trying to do at Canopy Foods is, we're looking at all of these products, and there's just a tremendous amount of new emerging brands out there, some with more value than others, and some amazing category leaders and sort of best-in-class products that have been around for a while. So we're sort of tackling both of those things. We want to have some really amazing larger suppliers and accounts that cover our overhead and keep the lights on, but are people that we're really, really proud to make their food and require a certain level of thought and care and love in order to scale them with integrity. Similarly with any sort of new emerging brand that we take on. And that so quickly goes downhill when you don't have people who are being attentive to detail and who are putting true thought behind their work, even to what otherwise I think people would consider to be pretty mindless tasks. And definitely a lot of people are surprised that I left my role at Whole Foods to go into manufacturing. But I think it has tremendous value. For me, the way that I see it is, the majority of Americans and the majority of us, what we're eating is coming from a grocery store shelf or from a bodega, from any number of places that are consumer product goods and are made in this way. So if we can, have impact there, if we can affect that style and method of food through any number of ways, but your question is sort of around the leadership and how we're actually managing the facility and the people there. There is a real value to this female consideration and just careful, thoughtful detail that's been sort of surprising to me, but it's an interesting and it's a cool effect of what we're trying to do is make excellent food and sort of super premium category leaders, but food that at any scale is going to be just excellent. And you need people to walk in the door for 8 hours a day who are in hairnets and in a manufacturing facility that's not glamorous at all and doing the same thing over and over and over again with care. And actually, this just brings to mind, does anyone know Fran's Chocolates? She's like an amazing female entrepreneur out in Seattle. Like, she herself is amazing. She's actually, I don't know how old, but probably at this point, 70-year-old woman, started this incredible chocolate company in Seattle, and I had a chance to visit her facility when I was still with Whole Foods about a year ago, and it just made me think that pretty much her entire workforce was female, and the level of precision, they're just doing truffles all day long, and watching it is like an art form, but I do think there's something to this detail, this care, and again, I don't want to say it's only something that a female can do, but we've really seen that in our facility. I will say, on the other hand, unfortunately, we are still pretty stacked on the leadership and senior team. I'm the only female that's in executive leadership or senior leadership. So there's definitely some work to be done there, and I think we have to right-size that.
So that's a great segue into the next question. I think one of the interesting things, so food made with love tastes a million times better.
Can you speak up, please?
I'm trying as hard as I can. Yeah.
You want to know this guy?
Yeah.
Here. Oh.
Okay, so food made with love tastes a million times better. But doing it at scale with integrity is really difficult, right? And so that's in the confines of the system that we currently have. So I think the point that you just brought up is in making your hiring decisions to hire people that have love and care for the product, that ultimately that shifts the system and enables you to create food made with love at scale. So my question to all of you is, we have this industrial food system that was built, designed, and run and financed by men, which has resulted in the food industry that we have today. What might the food industry look like if it were reimagined by women? How would we build it?
Small.
Really small. Daniel sent this question, and I was thinking about it earlier, and I looked up the brand Betty Crocker, and I read that Betty Crocker the brand was founded in the 1920s. Basically, this company that eventually merged with General Mills wanted to create this kind of fictional character to touch customer care in a more personal way. So they wanted to create this figure that could speak to their customers, answer questions about the products. And Betty Crocker was named Betty, this loving American name, and Crocker was after the man that was the basically director of the department that came up with the name. And for the longest time, basically this woman that was working for the company at the time was tasked to kind of be the Betty Crocker and kind of create this, what became a business. And they came out with different products and different extensions, and it wasn't until much later that kind of it came out that Betty Crocker wasn't a real person. Fast forward, and earlier this year we invested in a company called Food+Tech that's based out of California. Started by 2 women and a male co-founders. But they started Food+Tech because they really wanted to touch on the intimacy that's associated with baking with their children. So the CEO, as a mom, was baking with her child and was doing it, whether it was getting ready brownies for a bake sale or making pancakes in the morning with her kids. It was such a special experience to share with her children, and she just wished that there was something better out there. So she was giving either Betty Crocker or Duncan Hines or these kind of brands that had been around for so long. And she wanted to create something better that she felt good about giving her children. And so Food+Tech is this great brand, and that I don't think it's branded as modern baking. They're basically, their motto is bringing back baking. But they're doing it in a way where they're using fair trade chocolate, biodynamic sugar, single origin flour, which they can trace basically from field to facility. And I think that attention to detail and what we're seeing is women starting these companies based off of personal experiences and basing it off of a need that they have that they want to fill and bringing that attention to what they're doing in a way that really means something to the consumer in the end. And when I think about what our food system can become, I think it's that same level of care that we can bring and making decisions that nowadays they're the smart business decisions, investing in your flour supply and understanding where it comes from and supporting the farmers that are getting that to you. it's going to lead to a more successful business, and that's kind of what we're banking on, and we want to find companies that really believe in that, because I think it is a way to drive the change that we all hope to see in the food system.
Nailed it. That was so interesting. When I first had seen this question, it sort of made me think, in my mind, the industrial food system is driven mainly by economics and policy and politics, which, again, I haven't thought about or connected the fact that, of course, so much of economics are driven by men and sort of what's been built. And so in reimagining maybe women having sort of a different role in that, or affecting and impacting food products and sort of the food system at large, the, I think, great thing is finally the economics of food are recognizing that the purchasing power is held by women, and that primarily women are shopping and are the ones buying food, and so they we are the ones who should be making these developing these products. I think just to Val's experience with food stores in that example, it's a perfect example. So I mean, I think just because truly that's such a good way of summing it up. The only thing that I would say is, economics and the industrial food system has created food that acts like economic units rather than like fresh, beautiful, living, breathing food as it should be, because it can be moved around so much more easily if it has a 5-year shelf life and is completely nutritionally, not full of anything, and sort of the equivalent to cardboard. So for me, it's like, if women and if people who are being thoughtful and actually thinking about how those aren't just a matter of economics, but something that is going to nourish your body and feed your children and your family and any number of things, then those foods are going to be healthier, fresher, more nutrient dense, and actually serve a purpose and a value, and aren't just more easily traded and moved around.
So a few thoughts on this question. Love is so expensive. And most people don't have much money to spend on their food. And that, for me, is kind of a core challenge to the food system. And, I think it's about, righting inequity, making sure that all families have enough money. I think most people, when faced with most women, most men, when faced with a buying decision, the money price point is not the driving decision maker who would choose the product that's best for them, that's the most delicious. Like, that seems really obvious. And I don't think that's a gender decision, but making sure that people have enough money, that their jobs pay them enough to be able to purchase the food they love, and doing it at a scale and a price point so that more people can afford it is the driving kind of question. So that was like my first thinking. So like, love is expensive and there's a lot of mouths to feed and most people don't have the money. The second thing that I wanted to say, like another way to inject love into the food system, is like the right matchup between loving the work you do and the place that you're doing it. So I founded the organization under this core belief that if you find people that love their jobs, they're going to do it better. And so finding women, and I started with women because that was where we needed affirmative action in the food industry, but I believe it could have been, maybe when we're 50% in the job force of women, then we'll open it up to men. But until then, we're going to continue to push women into the culinary industry. But finding women who love to cook, who had the palate and attention to detail that it takes to really service the kind of food that we want to eat at scale, and train them and then get them the network to get into those good jobs, was my best intervention at getting better food into the workforce. And I think when people love their job, they do it with more attention to detail. So if you put me in front of truffles, like, I'd probably do better truffles than I would dog food, because I understand the value and the delicious of truffles. And so I think there are many ways at getting the right love. So like attaching the right talent is, I think, a key element of that. And then like the third kind of point I want to make on this is that when I started Hopper Kitchen, so what I didn't say is in the bakery we sell different ethnic breads that are inspired by the immigrant women that go through our training program, and then we sell those breads to pay for the training. that they receive to be in that program. So we do probably 120 different SKUs, and some of them are things that you see at a normal bakery. We do baguettes, and we do hamburger buns, and we do ciabatta rolls, and then we have quite a few really breads that you wouldn't see at a bakery unless it was an ethnic bakery in Queens. So we do Moroccan bread, and we do some Mexican breads and some Persian breads, and we do tortillas from Nixtamal. And when I, 10 years ago, or more than 10 years ago, when I had this vision, I always say I had this vision of an immigrant women's baking collective, and I thought we would all be around rolling out whole wheat chapati by hand, and we started pressing tortilla by hand, and we would be, pulling salmon off the grill, and for all you all who are in the audience, that's not what it's like, right? We needed to do it at scale, and to grow this business and to prove concept, we needed to make a ton of tortillas, because to make a business out of tortillas, you need to sell a crap load of tortillas. And so we make crap loads of tortillas every day, and we make a lot of these different ethnic breads, and our top selling SKUs, the top 2, fit into this category of ethnic breads, and then the next 5 of them are hamburger buns, multigrain loaves, the kinds of breads that really were not part of that esoteric vision. And so going back to the point around innovation and bringing it back to the topic of the conversation, the innovation was there, and it's what sells our products, but the reality of it is that the economics are what kills you, right? You have to sell it. So we love those breads and the vision, and I do believe we have an amazing team that we do our work every day with a heart full of love, but that in the end, you probably aren't going to love your hamburger buns as much as you love your salmon, but that's what New Yorkers eat, so that's what we make.
Wow. This is a really hard question to answer. I love the M7 so much. It's my favorite thing. I'm just gonna, if I keep going after you, I'll just keep talking about the breads that I love. But I'm gonna answer this question and talk not about scale, about smaller scale, with an emphasis on valuing all the different parts of the food system. Because it's levels to it, right? To quote KDOT. And value not necessarily with monetary value, but to appreciate and understand and realize there is worth, whatever that means. So I would like to talk a little bit about, backing up here. So what I want to talk about is different parts of how we connect to food, and one of the ways to do that is making food in your own home and also growing food. One of the projects that I'm currently working on is consulting with Just Food, which is an incredible nonprofit in New York City that has been doing food justice and sustainable agriculture advocacy work for over 20 years. Shout out to Kiana McKee, who's our amazing executive director, who's in the audience tonight. And Just Food's work is to empower, one of the main things that they do is empower folks in their communities with community gardens, to do training, to run their own community-run CSAs, and also run their own community-run farmers markets. So starting at the community scale, because you have to start by nourishing and feeding and empowering yourself and your home and the folks around you. And sometimes that's all you can do. And sometimes we need to recognize that if you have the privilege to have time to spend in a garden when you're not working or you're not looking for childcare, of course, we need to talk about even being able to do that. The privilege of being in this room to have this conversation. But I think if we can talk about, how do we affect people in manufacturing at a higher level, in a mass level, how we affect people in terms of fair labor at a larger level. How do we put love in that, but also start with love at all different levels of the food system? If that's it is a more holistic way of looking at it. And it is hard to remember to look at all these different ways. But I'm going to talk about that part as part of it.
Well, I'm going to ask you questions. I can just keep the mic.
Okay.
But I would say I've done a lot of work with a lot of big CPG companies. And the amazing thing is that a lot of them do not nourish themselves or their families with the food that they create. And there is a lot of shame about that. And you probably, when you eat their food, you feel shame. And they feel shame putting that product out into the world. So I think your point about the fact that, I think all the principles that you all laid out are really fundamental as far as the kind of world that I want to see, the products that I want to support, right? Where you're thinking about how are we nourishing that's an awesome responsibility. You know, you get to be in someone's life. You get to give them, I get goosebumps whenever I talk about this, really, because it's such, like, wow, someone invites you into their day, right? And they allow you to help them make it through their day and bring joy or have a conversation, a difficult conversation, or, you know, there's all these moments, you know, fall in love with someone, and you get to be there with them, or just, you know, make it through their work day. So, yeah, I think that that's a really interesting point, thank you, and all of you. So there's a lot of, it's really difficult to rewrite social norms and, you know, and gender norms. Where do we even begin?
Great question. Where do we even begin? I think one way to think about it first as a foundation is that hopefully we're all part of a process and we're at different points of our own individual processes with the companies that we work with the companies that we work for, in collaboration with. And hopefully we all keep evolving in how we move around in the world and within our relationships, whether that's professional, personal, whatever that overlaps. So I think what you were saying, and I'll speak a little bit about what you were saying earlier about folks being embarrassed that they can't nourish their own families with the food that they are making for other people. I think acknowledging that and owning that and leaning into that discomfort and being like, I'm working on my process, like I'm trying to nourish myself and take care of myself first and take care of my family and my community. Though sometimes there's gonna be hiccups, sometimes I forget to pack lunch, that's okay. So, with that to start, I also think that we can always be doing better and we can keep pushing ourselves and to keep asking questions as to, as to what it is that we want in our workplaces, as it is what we want in our communities, in our own kitchens, as we are engaging with the world. What is it, especially I think as women, I think this is already a way that we see difference, because this is a world, as we've been talking about, that has mostly been architected by men. Is that a word? Architected? Orchestrated by men. And I think in any case, when you are a minority in any fashion, you're like, yo, this wasn't set up for me. If I did this a little bit differently, I would want X, I would want Y, maybe Z would look slightly different. So think about that first, and then think about where you are, and what access you have, what relationships, what access to power, what power you have yourself, and can you bring somebody up with you when you're trying to make that change, to make your life a little better, and the other people around you? Is there someone else who doesn't have the privilege or access as you have? So when you are taking space, you're also making space for other people. And again, remember to make space for yourself and take that for yourself and take care of yourself first. Because if you don't do that, you can't help other people, right? But see how much you can do for other people, for your community, collectively, beyond just for yourself. I can talk about concrete things too. So that's sort of like philosophical groundwork. But concrete things. I mean, you were talking about leadership at Canopy. Like, upper level is like mostly men right now. Like, what? Everybody can play a different position in the movement, in the revolution, right? So, like, what can you do to push that within your organization? But also, what can the men do? Like, are they self-interrogating, right? And then for me, as an Asian American woman of color, as a yellow Asian, as an East Asian person with light-skinned Asian privilege, what am I doing for my Black and brown brothers and sisters and my siblings who reject the gender binary, who are also folks of color that are operating in this world where it is harder for them to get around than me, whether that's on the subway, in the streets, in a boardroom. Am I looking out for them? And what are the ways that I can do that? Or as we started with earlier, talking about simply gender pronouns, if we make it a norm that everyone announces what their preferred gender pronouns are, for folks that, and not in a performative way, but in a genuine, authentic way. And you know, that takes time, that takes practice. But if we do that, for folks where that question might be a little bit more freighted, it might just be a little bit easier for folks in general if we are living in an environment where that is totally normal and okay.
I think for Jessamyn, Elly, and Christy, you all are seeing a lot of entrepreneurs. You've seen a lot of entrepreneurs. female entrepreneurs that you're seeing? And yeah, even if you speak to the challenges around funding and the way that the kinds of companies that are being founded.
So let's study that. I bet you both have smart answers for this. So we support a lot of both. We support a lot of female and a lot of male started businesses and some great partnerships. We have supported 250 businesses. We have 80 in the incubator now, and I think I heard today 37 businesses have graduated. And like, I'll just come out and say it, of that 37, significantly more, not representative of the number of women in that 250 that we've supported over time, are male. So it has been a question, conflict, burning challenge for me, given that I started this incubator. We are a nonprofit, and in our charter, it is an organization that exists to help women get ahead in this industry. And the reality of it is that the incubator, men have had a higher success rate on graduation. And I think we don't know. Every entrepreneur is different, and it is a really tough challenge. We do introductions, we do access to capital. We have a lot of women who've gotten loans and brought in partnerships in the incubator, and so we work a lot on that. And I really resist the opportunity to hazard a guess. What I will say that I know deepest in my heart that the single best indicator of success of an entrepreneur is whether they can sell. And I'm a lady that can sell, and there are lots of great women entrepreneurs that I know that can sell the heck out of their product as good as anybody in the room. But whether that characteristic, the ability to effectively close a deal, is equally distributed in all of the pieces that go into selling. There's a million different ways to sell. But if I had to hazard a guess, I mean, I think the access to capital piece we can talk about, and I know you guys will talk to that. But if I could encourage the women entrepreneurs in the room, if you're gonna really push yourself in one area, it's like you gotta sell your product, you gotta toot your own horn, you gotta do that well, because that is what ultimately leads. And so, again, I don't want to say too much about it, but that is the piece that if I could really, champion and hazard, that's the one thing that we cannot do for entrepreneurs that we incubate. We can do all of it. We can introduce them to capital, we can help them with logistics, but really getting out there and helping people sell is the challenge. And I wonder sometimes if that is the piece that we're not seeing, is women selling themselves as hard as some of the male entrepreneurs. And that's a question.
So this is, I'm going to start out with very much like an observational anecdote. Like, it's a lot to be attempting to start a business. It's a lot to be taking this on, where I don't have any statistics around, sort of the stack in terms of funding, but I think we all know it's very imbalanced. I don't know, you might have like more numbers.
Yeah, you probably do too, but the one that we pulled is that 2% of venture capital goes to women, but they have a 63% higher return for investors than male investors.
So I think that it's really one of those things that I do think about a lot in terms of women then supporting women, because my one thought, again, very anecdotal, is just that women are very supportive and probably very kind to each other, but maybe aren't challenging each other enough to say, you know what, like, I'm so impressed by you, but like, you really need, for me, I certainly need a lot of like support and help on the financial side, and I've had a lot of like amazing female mentors at Whole Foods who sort of challenged me in certain ways in leadership, but not so much to take on bigger, just financial challenges. And I think that that would have benefited me. And even just as someone who's a mentor, or someone as a female who has the opportunity to guide other women, I think it's easy to just sort of champion and support and try to of course, build people up, that's important, but I think even more important is to really be honest and fair and give the feedback, whether that's also putting them in front of a male audience that might feel more comfortable to do that, but there's something to that sort of honesty and fairness that I think would go a long way for some female entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I would add, I read the 2% stat in 2017, which is tough to read, and I wrote it down so I didn't screw up, but also that the average deal size for women-led companies in 2017 was just over 5 million, whereas the average man-led company, the number's a little less than 12 million. So not only how many companies are getting founded by women, but kind of what women are going after, and in the stage of these almost insane valuations that are happening and the amount of money that people are raising. I read somewhere else that women often feel when they're going after funding that their performance is based more on what they have done historically, whereas men focus more on the projections and what they're looking to build. And I think a lot of that is kind of this need that we have to prove and justify what it is that we're building. And I would say, not to stereotype, but this kind of the care and the attention to detail that women bring to the table, we want to be sure that we are proving ourselves. We want to be sure that we are being financially responsible and that we are building these sustainable businesses. And that's right, and it's a good way to think about it. It's just not kind of this aggressive way that men are going out and asking for money from. And to that point of whether we need to act more like men, I think that's where it's important to see the balance and kind of the real conversation should be blending the two, and how can we be aggressive and ask for what it is that we need to build the businesses that we want to grow, while staying true to the care and the attention that we're putting into what we're building.
Okay, last question before we open it up. In 30 seconds or less, who's your role model and why?
I had a few, so I'm just going to go with the easy one for 30 seconds. I have 3 older sisters, all of whom are working moms, and I'm just so impressed. One of them has 5 kids and runs a very successful small business, and I'm just so impressed and sort of inspired by them every day.
Can I ask them a question? You guys both work with male partners and are making investments in businesses. Do you feel like entrepreneurs get equal due diligence?
Like are you taken off, sort of like are women and men getting the same, right? That thing to like, you gotta ask for what you need. When women ask for what they need, are they getting the same level of questioning as the male entrepreneurs? I'm just curious if you could observe the dynamic there. Yeah.
I mean, probably not. I think there's a sense of, if this is a solo female business, do we feel confident that they're gonna have the capital that they're, like, being totally honest, I think there is this sense of, like, do we feel as confident in this entity? And that's sort of been so far in what I've seen. And I don't know, it's like you don't know if that's an intention, if it just like is part of it's baked in this way that's really insidious, and a lot of sort of what Kim is alluding to. It's like you're not looking at any of these situations for what they are and saying this is all baked in, this has been there, it's systemic, and it's affecting sort of every decision. So yes, probably.
Super interesting, and to think about, and at Almanac there's 2 of us, so we're split 50-50, and just hearing you ask the question, I think what I think more is, it's interesting as I'm kind of combing through these companies in my head of the takeaways and what stands out to me about companies and the conversations we've had about companies. And I feel like, just thinking about it quickly, kind of companies started by men and the companies started by women that we've spoken to, it's almost what stands out leading the conversation, and whether that's conscious or not. Oftentimes, the female founder that we're speaking to, it's the story and the genuineness of the product, and it's kind of this ability to market it and who it's going to resonate with, and just really feeling empowered by what they're going out to build. And I feel like with a male-founded company, of course, generalizations, it's a lot more of kind of the opportunity, the white space, and targeting this part of the industry that you want to go after. And it kind of naturally leads to then more storytelling or more just kind of fact-driven opportunity that you're going after. And
Do you feel like women are not going after those opportunities?
it's a good question. I think, yes, I think in the companies that we've spoken to, it's kind of what are the opportunities, and it's kind of much more direct. Like I see a need in nut butters, and I'm going to go after this because no one's innovated it, and I'm going to go after it, or I'm going to repeat kind of what some of the other trajectories have been on, as opposed to like I am a mom trying to feed my kids, and I don't have time to make meals, and what can I get them that's prepared that I feel good about feeding them. Those are kind of two very different opportunities. One I feel like is a quicker, kind of more direct, see the product, make the product, get it out, and the other is kind of build this company that solves a need for what we need.
But you're both white space opportunities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. Yeah, and how it's talked about, and kind of what's focus in pitching the company or business.
Yeah, and I think that the willingness to, I think, and I speak from experience on this one and going out and generating resources and doing the fundraising piece of it, like humility is a very attractive quality, but it breeds difficult questions, right? And so I encourage you all as innovators in the food space to like breathe as much hubris as you can, because you don't get as difficult due diligence. Right? Like I think that that's like a strategy, and I think very often and I'm speaking for myself, like defer to this place of like humility and recognizing the success of the model, but the challenges, and that's an attractive thing, and it makes people want to hear your story, and it's really compelling. But then I'm like thinking maybe you end up in these like kind of places in the conversation that you don't want to be, because you're kind of, you know, opening the kimono too much. So.
Just quickly adding, and I'll call them out because White Mustache is here today. I was joking earlier. White Mustache is truly my favorite yogurt. And I was talking to Homa, this was last year at some point, we were talking to her. And if anyone that knows Homa, she's an incredible entrepreneur. And we were talking, and she's like, it's so weird. Like, I keep having to raise the prices of my yogurt, and they just keep selling out at Whole Foods. And we just like looked at her. I said, David, we just looked at her, and we're like, oh, but your yogurt is delicious. And like the people that buy your yogurt will buy it all the time, no matter what you're selling it in those cute little glass jars. And Homa, that like humbleness of like, who knows why it's selling. Homa was also one of the most determined entrepreneurs I know, and that she was like, I will actually stop production of my yogurts until I can figure out a solution for the whey that's resulting from it. And those popsicles that we were having outside are a result of that, and kind of that commitment to what she is setting out to do is what makes her a tremendous entrepreneur, and her product is delicious, and I will buy it anywhere she goes. But she can be humble in the sense of like, who knows why it sells, but it's the determination that sets her apart.
Alma was going to be one of my other role models. Truly, she's incredible.
I call her for mine.
Let's start that question because I asked a good question.
Long live King Mulberry seasonal flavor. I'm going to answer this question and also do a more concrete follow-up to your last question. One of my role models is Julia Turshen, who is a celebrated cookbook author and the founder of Equity at the Table, and she's why I'm here today. She's an incredible model for how to make space and take space. As a queer woman, as a white cisgender woman, modeling what allyship and being an accomplice truly looks like. And one of the concrete ways that you can keep thinking about diversity and a true idea of inclusion and bring more equity into your workplace is to check out resources like Equity at the Table, to build with other folks and to look for folks to work with and collaborate with and hire. And whose products and things you can buy and support and love.